2024 is an absolutely special year because my YouTube channel celebrates its 10-year anniversary. For just only this year, if you would like to support me, you can do that now via visiting paypal.me/BrettCaliber. But if you do not like to do any charity, you can help yourself by buying a Windows 10 or 11 Pro retail key for still $12.50 only. That would also greatly support me. Anyway, I want to thank you all for 10 years of your amazing support.
Move it! Yes, sir! Keep moving!
Hi everyone. I couldn't resist making this video after watching those ridiculous Star Wars Outlaws clips, It was pretty funny at first, but then I realized things aren't really funny for Ubisoft itself. The company is really sick. Really sick. So yeah, I thought these clips perfectly capture the mess that Ubisoft has become nowadays. And trust me, things are even worse behind the scenes. So Ubisoft, the company, the great company we once loved, is now in serious trouble. And today we're going to dive deep into what went wrong with Ubisoft. Before we get into the chaos, let me make a trip down memory lane. I used to love Ubisoft games. They were one of my favorite childhood memories. So yeah, an example, the first Rayman, that game was really an awesome game and really brings back nostalgia to me. But I think, for me personally, the best product Ubisoft ever made was Beyond Good and Evil. That game was so exceptionally underrated and so great, when it comes to atmosphere, to gameplay. It was really something unique. And even while Beyond Good and Evil 2 was announced years and years ago, we probably will never see it. And then the games I liked the most, for the rest, I didn't really ever care much about Assassin's Creed, but I love the Far Cry series, especially Far Cry 2 in the Africa setting, which had some great mechanics like weapon jams, also atmosphere, characters, it was really an amazing game. And then Far Cry 3, probably the best Far Cry out of the series, with Vaz, who can forget that guy. But also weapon mechanics, atmosphere on the island, really amazing. Maybe I'm just one of the few people on the planet who loved Far Cry 5. This was considered not to be the best Far Cry per se, but I loved the atmosphere of Far Cry 5. Also the gunplay, the characters. I really love Joseph Seed. And yeah, for the rest, the last couple of Ubisoft games all seem to be more miss than an actual hit. They are pretty bad, with the newest addition to that, Star Wars Outlaws, of course. And then we also unfortunately can expect really horrible results from the new Assassin's Creed. So what is going on with Ubisoft? Well, as per today, Ubisoft stock is in free fall. It recovered somewhat, but it is still very unstable. So after the disastrous release of Star Wars Outlaws, their stock dropped by over 10% within just 2 days. Normally after a huge release you should see definitely some increasement in your stock, especially if you have good sales, but their stock dropped by over 10% in just 2 days. So for a company as big as Ubisoft, that kind of plunge is devastating. And Star Wars Outlaws was supposed to be a huge release for them, a game that was going to save their year financially. Instead, there are very mixed reviews, but after all, I think we can all agree that this game has been a horrible disappointment, and things aren't really getting better for Ubisoft. For the ones who remember the Skull and Bones release, this game was delayed endlessly, like again, I think like 5-6 times over the time span of, 6-7 years maybe. Also, their multiplayer shooter X Defiant is barely doing a thing, it's barely making a ripple. And fans, they pretty much have given up on franchises like Rayman, like Splinter Cell. Also, For Honor wasn't really the game that it was supposed to be. And meanwhile, Assassin's Creed, it's getting milked dry, and this new one, Assassin's Creed, which is going to be released, also has its own controversy hanging around it already before it's even released. So things have gotten bad for Ubisoft. How bad? Well, things have gotten so bad that one of Ubisoft's shareholder, a hedge fund called AJ Investments, actually sent an open letter to Ubisoft's board. In this letter, they outright say that the company is being mismanaged and that shareholders are hostages to Yves Guillemot, the family which is controlling Ubisoft, and Tencent, the Chinese mega corporation that holds a large stake in the company. So that's kind of accusation, and yeah, if this really happens from one of your big shareholders, you know things are really, really bad. So AJ Investments, this shareholder, is even threatening a proxy fight to force Ubisoft to go private or to be sold. So going for its ultimate, worst case scenario destiny, which a company can have, to either go private or sold or go bankrupt, of course, but usually they try to sell it to some different investor. Now, what does that actually mean for you and me, us gamers? Well, if this hedge fund has its way, Ubisoft could be forced into selling itself to a bigger player in the industry. So like maybe even Sony, Microsoft, those kind of big companies. And if that would happen a few years from now, Ubisoft could just be another first-party studio under a different banner. And that's all pretty much because the Yves Guillemot family couldn't really manage the company properly over all these years. There have been many scandals regarding Ubisoft and the games they have been released the last couple of years. And it seems that management isn't really changed as it should have been to prevent all of this disastrous stuff. And it's just very simple, the solution is very simple. The problem with Ubisoft is that they stopped focusing on what really matters: making good games. Instead, the company has become so obsessed with hitting just quarterly financial targets, pleasing shareholders. It just doesn't really innovate anymore, and it's just really a problem, which apparently the Yves Guillemot family doesn't want to see. They really think they can just jump on bandwagons like games as a service, focusing on that because they've seen some of those games will do score, so they try something of that themselves, but they just keep failing over and over and over, and apparently the Yves Guillemot and the Guillemot family just doesn't see it, which really eventually leads to this really big mess. And just with Star Wars Outlaws, they didn't have an excuse anymore why this was supposed to be a bad game. This game was not a game as a service game, not a gas game. This game was also not a multiplayer game like Star Wars Battlefront, so they couldn't really theoretically screw it up with microtransactions. And they just had to focus on this game, this open world Star Wars game, but still they messed it up. And with that, I think the team which currently they have in Ubisoft is just not capable anymore of creating a good game. And with that, I also don't see any future anymore in any Beyond Good and Evil 2 release, a really ambitious game. I don't think Ubisoft has it anymore. I think the team has changed so much over the years. I think the mismanagement by the Guillemot family has done such a bad thing for, all their games that it just shows that this company is sick, very, very sick. And for me personally, Star Wars Outlaws was actually also supposed to be their savior game, their game which, Ubisoft could show we can actually do it, but they failed. And then you would say Ubisoft has one last trick up their sleeves: Assassin's Creed Shadows. The problem is it's already going to be a disaster and already heavily criticized. So let's talk about Assassin's Creed Shadows, Ubisoft's next big release, and they already get people talking, but not in a good way. So on the surface it seems like it should be another easy win, in Assassin's Creed, this time in feudal Japan, in a setting fans have been begging for it since the early days of Assassin's Creed. The idea of running around across the rooftops of an Edo area Japan, wielding katanas and exploring the ancient samurai culture should be a dream come true. But there's a problem, and actually there's lots of problems. First of all, Assassin's Creed Shadows has been criticized for its approach to representation. Instead of focusing on a rich historical depth and history of Japan, Ubisoft seems to be leaning heavily into tokenized characters and forced diversity. Again, so many examples already. And there's a place for diverse representation in games, of course, but the way Shadows is handling it, it feels like it is checking, you know, all the right boxes for the sake of appearances and inclusivity, instead of building just a great, historically accurate Assassin's Creed in Japan. And don't get me wrong, I don't really care what kind of skin color a main character has. If he is yellow, pink, blue, black, white, green, I don't care. But the problem with this, I think, is they are just giving false historical information about the main character. This guy never was an actual samurai. As far as what I've read is he was just an assistant and had absolutely no influence on the history of samurai in Japan, which, you know, is this just false information? I mean, you know, if you did just make it fully fictional, but they didn't. They actually presented this as somewhat of a fact. You know, this is an actual samurai, but it is not. And what doesn't also help is that they're adding like a hip-hop soundtracks to the trailers. That just makes it feel even more cringe and horrible in a way that they have to almost check all the checkboxes when it comes to diversity. But that's not necessarily the biggest issue. The biggest issue we're going to probably have with the game is the gameplay, where this game should be all about. What we have seen so far, it looks like again another copy-paste job from Ubisoft of another open-world formula game. So a huge map which feels really empty, climbing towers, clearing outposts and doing this over and over again. It's the same repetitive design we have seen in, example, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but many other open world games from, I would say, the last 10 years. And, you know, even though they're setting the game in this ancient Japan, a location with very much potential, the core gameplay still has not changed. They're doing it all again, you know, the same thing. And there's no indication that Assassin's Creed Shadows will break anything or offer any real innovation. So again, you still will be marking objectives on your map, tagging enemies, clearing enemy camps, and completing a load of fetch quests again for random NPCs. And in addition to this, combat. Another thing that's pretty concerning is the combat system. While earlier Assassin's Creed games relied heavily on stealth and strategy, Assassin's Creed Shadow again seems to be pushing more the action approach, just like Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And yeah, nowadays a lot of fans feel this deviates way too much from the original unique aspect from the Assassin's Creed games. So yeah, what we have seen, they're introducing again over-the-top combat moves, and even while that's pretty not Assassin's Creed-ish, especially for a samurai game, this makes it even worse. Especially if you have played a game like Ghost of Tsushima, you can see how a good samurai game is or can actually be, but this is just probably going to feel like one of those many arcade-ish combat games or combat styles which we have seen lately in the Assassin's Creed series, also being implemented in Assassin's Creed Shadows. So yeah, competing titles are just doing it better. So like I said, Ghost of Tsushima, it is doing pretty much everything this game should be, but it is doing better. And yeah, an example also, Black Myth Wukong is a great game which you rather pay $80, how do you say it? You rather pay $80 for instead of Assassin's Creed Shadows. So this game feels like it is coming way too late to the party. And not only that, it feels like it's coming without any new ideas, and one of the other generic games Ubisoft is going to release. So like that, Assassin's Creed Shadows is a perfect representation of Ubisoft's big problems they have. Also, this game should have been a game like a sure win-win, but instead it's already being met with a lot of skepticism and a lot of disappointment. To end this video, it is clear that Ubisoft is completely out of touch with what the fans want, and yeah, you know, I don't really see this getting better, you know. This company is very sick, and I think it's just a matter of time before one of the big companies is going to buy it. Maybe Microsoft will do it, maybe Tencent will fully buy it, but the problem is with Yves Guillemot and Guillemot family, they just didn't do anything in the last 10 years regarding innovation. I think they mostly wanted to jump on the bandwagon regarding games as a service, trying to get those profits, but it is become a company that is only there for shareholders and not for the gamers anymore. So I'm afraid Ubisoft will die a sick death eventually for a very financially unstable company. What do you think about Ubisoft? Let me know that in the comment section, and hope to see you at one of my next videos.